Imagine standing atop the highest peak on Earth, gazing down from Mount Everest's 29,031.7 feet, or diving into the abyss of the Mariana Trench at an incredible depth of 35,876 feet. As humans, we've conquered the most towering mountains and explored the deepest oceans. But there are places on our planet that are even more difficult to get to than these two extremes. Places so remote, so hidden, that they challenge even the bravest adventurers. The Earth's surface spans 196.9 million square miles. And on this vast planet, there are places that are even harder to reach than Everest's peak or the Mariana's dark depths. Are you ready for a journey to the most inaccessible spots on our planet? Getting around the planet is easier and faster for humans today than at any other point in the past. We have passenger aircraft that can fly hundreds of miles per hour, enormous ocean liners that travel across oceans in a little over a week, and cars that can drive people pretty much wherever they want to go as long as there are roads to get there. And sometimes, even if there aren't. We don't need to go too far back in time before none of these things existed. Ships have been around for tens of thousands of years, but it wasn't until the 1800s that ocean liners crossed the Atlantic. On January 29, 1886, Carl Benz applied for a patent for his vehicle powered by a gas engine, meaning the first automobile was invented just over 135 years ago. On December 17, 1903, the Wright brothers flew the first aircraft in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. We have obviously come a long way since all of these events, but one thing is still true. Regardless of how advanced technology has become, there are just some places on planet Earth that are extremely difficult to reach. Humans are born explorers. Our species evolved in Africa and migrated to every continent except Antarctica in less than 200,000 years. This may sound like it took a long time, but we have to remember that early humans traveled almost entirely by foot and small boats to populate the planet. There were no trains, planes, or domesticated animals to help with their journey, and yet by around 12,000 BC, humans had spread to 6 different continents. With all the technology we have today, getting anywhere in the world should be simple. But just because you may be able to see more remote regions from a distance, or by looking up images online, getting to some of these places is an entirely different story. So let's take a trip to some of the world's most isolated spots. Places so remote that reaching them requires not just courage, but extraordinary patience. Places where even time seems to stand still. Prepare for a journey where weeks might pass in pursuit of a single destination, and where the road less traveled truly exists. Are you ready for a true adventure? Let's start by going to Tristan da Cunha. These are a group of volcanic islands that sit in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. These islands have a population of just 235 people. There is no airport, and only 3 ships regularly travel to the island to bring mail, supplies, and passengers. The ships leave once a month from Cape Town, South Africa, which is approximately 1,732 miles east of Tristan da Cunha. The voyage between Cape Town and Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, the only settlement on the island, takes about 6 days, but since the ships only return every month, you'll likely need to remain there for at least several weeks before you'll be able to return to Cape Town. Tristan da Cunha is technically a British overseas territory, although the population has very little contact with the British government itself and runs everything on the island. Once you're on the volcanic island, there are even more difficult places to reach. The rugged terrain and sharp volcanic rocks make traveling across the landscape difficult. St. Mary's Peak is the highest point on the island at 6,758 feet, and climbing up the side of Tristan da Cunha volcano to reach its peak is no easy task. If your goal was to reach St. Mary's Peak, you would need to fly to Cape Town, get on a boat that leaves for Edinburgh of the Seven Seas once a month, travel the choppy waters of the Atlantic Ocean for 7 or more days depending on the weather, get off at Calshot Harbor, board a public bus to the potato fields, or convince a resident to drive you to the end of one of the very few roads on the island, and then hike the rest of the way up the volcano. Then, you'd have to do the same thing in reverse to get home, so the entire trip would likely take at least 2 months. It may seem unbelievable, but although St. Mary's Peak on Tristan da Cunha is a very difficult place to get to, it's not even close to being the most difficult. So what could be tougher than scaling a volcano on an incredibly isolated island? Let's head to the desert and find out. To qualify as a desert, an area has to receive less than 10 inches of precipitation a year. This often results in the amount of evaporation in a desert greatly exceeding the annual rainfall, leading to vast, sandy expanses, like you'll find in the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert is approximately 3,320,000 square miles. Getting to the Sahara itself isn't that difficult, since it encompasses the majority of 10 countries in North Africa. If you were to travel to Nouakchott, the capital of Mauritania, El Oued in Algeria, Timbuktu in Mali, Agadez in Niger, Ghat in Libya, and Faya-Largeau in Chad, you would be in the Sahara Desert, so getting there would be relatively easy. But if you wanted to travel to the middle of the Sahara, then that's a different story altogether. It's hard to define where the exact middle of the Sahara would be. So for our purposes, let's define it as the spot where the borders of Niger, Algeria, and Libya meet. There are no population centers, villages, or roads in much of the Sahara. So how would you get there? Your journey begins with a flight to Ghat International Airport, a name grander than its reality, since in reality, it's little more than a runway. This is the closest airport to our destination. But even just booking a flight would present difficulties since it requires the aid of a travel agency with specific operations in Libya, and according to some reports, may not even be operational anymore. So instead, you'll be flying into Seba International Airport, another small airport that's also located in Libya, but over 100 miles further from your destination. There are now 4 main complexes to which certain members of the government are assigned. Unsurprisingly, the capitals of Niger, Algeria, and Libya, where major airports are located, are about as far away from the middle of the desert as possible and closer to the coast or a major source of water. Once you manage to get into the general vicinity, the real challenge begins. You'll need an all-terrain vehicle or dirt bike because the nearest road is a staggering 101 miles away. And you better hope your rental car has AC, since temperatures in the region can reach as high as a scorching 122 degrees Fahrenheit. There are no sources of water on your route, so any you see will just be a mirage, tempting you to wander off into the desert. And if you do, you're in real trouble, since there's no major landmarks to guide you or cell phone service to call for help in case you really get into trouble. So getting lost in this barren landscape isn't just an inconvenience, it's a death sentence. But while dangerous, the logistics of your trip to the middle of the Sahara are at least conceivable for an average person. So now let's look at some places where it starts to get really tough to even figure out how to get there. Beneath the chilling Arctic waves, shrouded in darkness, lies the Gakkel Ridge. Positioned between Greenland and Siberia, the Gakkel Ridge is the deepest mid-ocean ridge in the world and reaches depths of up to 3 miles. If you thought the top of the world was hard to reach, try exploring its hidden underside. Just reaching this geological marvel is a feat reserved for only the most intrepid of explorers. It requires a specially designed vessel that can break through pack ice and navigate the treacherous Arctic waters. Ships with these kinds of capabilities are nearly all research vessels, so unless you're a scientist assigned to study the Gakkel Ridge or have a lot of money to fund such an expedition yourself, reaching this geological feature will be tough. But let's say you managed to charter a special trip to the waters above the Gakkel Ridge. Once you reached the area by boat, you would need to descend into the frigid depths of the Arctic Ocean via submersible to reach the ridgeline itself. The Gakkel Ridge is approximately 1,100 miles long. Its peaks can rise 12,467 feet from the ocean floor, and its valleys can descend 1,600 feet deep. The logistics of getting a ship into position, deploying a submersible, diving to the top of the ridge, and then continuing down another 12,000 feet without being crushed by the pressure would make journeying down to this part of the ocean floor more difficult than many others. But there is another part of the ocean that is much deeper than the Gakkel Ridge. The aforementioned Mariana Trench lies in the Pacific Ocean, and one specific spot, known as the Challenger Deep, is the deepest known part of the seabed on the entire planet. The entire Mariana Trench is a little more than 1,580 miles long and has an average width of 43 miles. This makes the underwater mountain range longer than the Himalayas, which are 1,500 miles long. In fact, if you put Mount Everest at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the peak would still be around 7,000 feet below the surface. Getting to the waters above Challenger Deep is relatively easy compared to reaching Gackle Ridge. You would first fly to the island of Guam, which can be done daily from Hawaii, Japan, or any number of other countries in Asia. From Tokyo alone, there are around 4 direct flights to Guam each day. Once in Guam, you would take a ship southwest about 200 miles. You would then be sitting right above the deepest point on the planet. But the easy part is over, and if you truly wanted to reach the bottom of the trench, you would need some very specialized equipment. There are actually 3 different pools that make up Challenger Deep: the Western, Central, and Eastern pools. Each of these is over 35,761 feet deep, so any vessel that wants to reach the bottom of one of these pools must be able to withstand the weight of over 35,000 feet of water pushing down on it, which comes out to around 8,000 kilograms of pressure per square inch. Don Walsh and Jacques Piccard accomplished the first ever descent to the bottom of Challenger Deep in 1960. They remained the only 2 humans to ever reach this part of the planet for 52 years until 2012, when filmmaker and explorer James Cameron completed the first solo dive to the bottom of the Challenger Deep. In 2019, a deep submergence vehicle called Limiting Factor began conducting regular dives at the trench, and as of November 2022, 22 dives have reached the bottom of Challenger Deep, 19 of which were done by Limiting Factor. The only other limiting factor that is keeping more people from reaching the deepest part of the planet is the cost of doing so. While getting to the surface waters above the Mariana Trench or even Challenger Deep is actually pretty simple, it's those last 6.7 miles straight down that make the bottom of the ocean in this part of the world one of the most difficult places to reach. After going down to the deepest point on Earth, you may be expecting the highest point on the planet to be next, but this is not the case. Mount Everest's very name alone conjures images of daring adventure, unbreakable determination, and the ultimate conquest over the Earth's grandeur. But is it still the uncharted frontier it once was? While difficult to summit due to its thin air and extreme weather, over 6,000 people have reached its peak. And for those with the financial means and minimal level of fitness, the ascent is not only possible, but getting easier all the time. All you have to do at this point is stand in line as part of a human traffic jam, risking not just your life, but the life of your guide as well. But Everest's story takes a much darker turn. Once a symbol of human triumph over nature, it's now becoming a cautionary tale, as the adventure that lures thousands to its slopes has led to a crisis. The melting snow, once pristine and pure, now carries human waste down into the water sources of villages around the mountain. Corpses are left on the icy slopes until they can either be recovered or become a permanent fixture, a grim marker for future climbers. The allure of Mount Everest remains, but it may be time to add Mount Everest to a list of places you shouldn't go for ethical reasons, more so than its difficulty. But whether we're going to the very top or the very bottom of the world, all of these locations so far have been places people have been before. So what about parts of the Earth that are truly impossible to get to? If we're discussing the most difficult places in the world to reach, then we need to talk about the places no one has ever been and places where no one will likely ever go, like the Challenger Deep and the Gackle Ridge, come with all kinds of complications. But this is because our oceans are vast. More than 70% of the surface of the Earth is made up of oceans, which means there is still a lot left to explore. We know relatively little about the ocean floor or the deep-sea creatures that live below the photic zone, which is the area where sunlight no longer penetrates the depths of the water. It's the sheer size and depths of the ocean that makes the sea floor one of the most unexplored places in the world. But what about the land? Are there any places on the surface of the planet where humans have never stepped foot? Surprisingly, yes. As we mentioned, Mount Everest has the highest elevation on the planet, with a peak that sits around 5.49 miles above sea level. But there are a couple of other mountains that are shorter than Mount Everest that have never been summited, making them some of the most difficult places to reach on the planet. However, before we explore these locations, here's a fun fact. Although the peak of Mount Everest is the highest altitude above sea level on Earth, it is not technically the tallest mountain. You might be surprised to learn that honor actually goes to a tropical paradise in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Mauna Kea is a volcano on the Big Island of Hawaii. Though it stands at only 13,796 feet above the sea, it hides a secret beneath the waves. Extending nearly 20,000 feet below the ocean's surface, Mauna Kea's true height from base to peak is around 33,500 feet, making it over 4,400 feet taller than Everest. But unlike Everest, if you wanted to hike or get to the top of the tallest mountain in the world, you wouldn't need to risk your life, destroy the high-altitude ecosystem of the Himalayas, or wear an oxygen mask. Instead, you could book a flight to Hawaii, hike to the summit of Mauna Kea, and be back at your hotel in time for dinner. But you don't want a vacation. You're looking for a challenge. You want to reach a place on the surface of our planet that no one else has ever been to before. So let's head from Hawaii to Southern Asia. Gangkhar Puensum is the highest mountain in the country of Bhutan and sits along the Bhutan-China border. Its highest peak is 24,836 feet from its base, making it just over 4,000 feet shorter than Mount Everest. But just because it is shorter doesn't mean climbing to the top is easier. In fact, Gangkhar Puensum has never been summited before, and it's not for a lack of trying. There have been at least 4 serious attempts to climb Gangkhar Puensum, and unfortunately for these mountaineers, all of the expeditions had to turn back due to high winds, seemingly impossible sections, and intense frostbite. In 2003, the government of Bhutan passed a law that made mountaineering illegal in the country, so while people can still hike along designated trails, expeditions cannot be launched to summit high-altitude peaks. Therefore, it would be illegal to attempt to reach the summit of Gangkhar Puensum today, which is definitely another reason besides the impossible ascent that the top of this mountain is one of the most difficult places to reach in the world. And it's likely that it will retain its title of the tallest mountain on Earth that's never been summited for some time. Then there is Machu Chish. This mountain is 24,452 feet tall, making it slightly shorter than Gangkhar Puensum, but perhaps even more difficult to reach. A large part of that is because it is part of the Karakoram mountain range, in one of the most disputed regions of the planet. Pakistan, China, and India all claim that this part of the world falls within their territories, but due to the ruggedness of the terrain, no clear borders have been established. This means there are a number of factors standing in the way for anyone who wants to attempt an ascent to Machu Chish. So while getting there is next to impossible, that's just the beginning of the adventure. The path to the top is a labyrinth of snow and barely defined ridgelines, a journey through a landscape that seems almost designed to repel intruders. If that wasn't bad enough, one of the largest glaciers outside the polar regions is found in the Karakoram mountain range and makes up the north face of Machu Chish. Multiple attempts have been made to climb this mountain, but every single one has been turned back, primarily due to bad weather. The mountain's very inaccessibility and insurmountable nature have turned Machu Chish into a symbol of the unattainable, the tallest mountain that can legally be climbed but has never been summited, and the challenges it poses are so significant that humans may never conquer its peak. Mountains don't serve as the only difficult locations to reach on land. Beneath the surface of the Earth lie cave systems that are just as mysterious and dangerous as the tallest mountains. Spelunkers who descend into the depths of the planet face challenges that rival and sometimes exceed those found on the highest summits. Hidden under the rugged landscapes of the Republic of Abkhazia, recognized by most of the world as part of Georgia, are the deepest known caves in the world. And within these, perhaps the most difficult place to reach is the bottom of the Veryovkina cave, which as far as we know, descends 7,257 feet under the crust of the planet. To put that into perspective, that's approximately 1.3 miles straight down. It's like climbing Mount Everest in reverse, but harder and probably just as, if not more, dangerous. Adventurers have been exploring Veryovkina Cave for over 50 years, but it wasn't until 2018 that Moscow-based speleological clubs finally located the bottom of the cave. Doing so took them about a week, and as you can imagine, it came with a number of risks. One team nearly drowned when the cave began filling up with water during a flash flood, but thankfully everyone survived. But while Veryovkina Cave holds the record for the deepest cave, we don't actually know how deep it goes, which is true of many large cave systems. The entrance to Veryovkina Cave sits between two mountains in the Arabica Massif. Just getting to the vertical shaft that leads down into the cave is difficult, but once there, things get even harder. Descending into this cave requires very specific skills and training, a lot of courage, and maybe even a little stupidity. The risks are high. An estimated 3 people lose their lives each year to cave exploration, and within these underground chambers, darkness is more than a lack of light. It's so deep and thick, you could almost touch it. There are few places on our planet where you can experience absolute darkness, but deep within these caves, you can't escape it. There are undoubtedly countless cave systems that have yet to be explored, and some might even be deeper than Veryovkina Cave. And the reality is that the very deepest may never be visited by humans, since they're extremely difficult or in some cases impossible to reach. As mentioned before, after early humans left Africa, they migrated across the planet and eventually reached every continent except one, and it would be many, many years before we would. Antarctica was the last continent on Earth humans hadn't stepped foot on until the early 1800s. At the time, many explorers actually believed there was a 7th continent known as Terra Australis Incognita, or the unknown southern land. However, no one had been able to prove it existed, so a number of expeditions were launched to confirm the existence of land at the southernmost pole of the globe. Early explorers ran into trouble when large pieces of ice would slam into the hulls of their ships and cause immense damage. It was dangerous looking for this unknown southern land, but expeditions continued to push the envelope. As global competition to claim more territory heated up, Russia, England, and the United States all sent ships to the frigid waters of the Antarctic to locate whatever land existed and claim it as their own. On January 27, 1820, Russian captain Fabian von Bellingshausen spotted a solid ice wall that was likely an ice shelf attached to what would later be named Queen Maud Land. 3 days later, a British naval officer by the name of Edward Bransfield sighted the tip of what we know today as the Antarctic Peninsula. An American sealer and explorer named John Davis is often claimed to have been the first human to actually step foot on Antarctica, but the exact location of his landing is unclear, and there are doubts about whether he actually made it onto the mainland. However, standing on the edge of Antarctica is one thing. Traveling across the barren landscape to reach unknown parts of the frozen continent is another. Now that everyone knew where Antarctica was located, the next step was to launch an expedition to find the South Pole. On December 14, 1911, Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen, who was part of the race to the pole, finally reached the southern pole, though tragically he died on the journey back. But today, Antarctica hasn't just been visited, it even has a population of its own. Most are scientists doing research, but currently 18 countries operate year-round research stations on the continent. It is estimated there are approximately 10,000 scientists and support staff in Antarctica during the summer months and around 1,000 in winter. To be fair, Antarctica is no longer that hard to get to, as there are now airplanes and ships that travel there to deliver supplies and carry researchers back and forth. However, there are still parts of the landscape that are incredibly hard to get to, and some areas that have never been walked on by humans. Mount Sidley is the tallest volcano in Antarctica, at 14,058 feet high. Unlike Genkar Puensum and Machu Chish, Mount Sidley has been summited, but the fact that it rests around 200 miles from the coast means that any expedition has to either cross the ice caps or take a specialized aircraft that can land in the snow. Then, using specialized gear, mountaineers would need to hike from the base to the summit and back down again without slipping and falling off the side of the dormant volcano. In January of 1990, New Zealander Bill Atkinson was the first to summit Mount Sidley while working with the United States Antarctic Program Scientific Field Party. Since then, around 10 expeditions have been launched to the volcano, but Mount Sidley remains one of the hardest places in the world to get to, not just because it is a tall, dangerous mountain, but because it is one of the most truly remote locations on the planet. A massive amount of Antarctica has yet to be explored though, and likely never will be. There is a reason most research is conducted on bases during summer. During winter, the temperatures range from -4 to -22 degrees Fahrenheit on the coast, and -40 to -94 degrees Fahrenheit in the interior of the continent. However, satellites have detected temperatures dipping as low as -144 degrees on the frozen continent. Luckily, there are no polar bears in the Antarctic, as they are only found in the Arctic regions of our planet. However, there are an estimated 5 million penguins in Antarctica, which means they outnumber the human scientists there by around 500 to 1. Getting to Antarctica can be expensive, and once you're there, it can be an unforgiving landscape. But it is still possible to get there. There are, though, places on Earth that a human just can't go, no matter how hard they try or how much technology advances. So once again, we head back to Hawaii. These islands might be paradise to visit, but they are also home to one of the most inhospitable places on the planet. The Big Island of Hawaii has not one, but 5 active volcanoes, one of which, Mauna Loa, holds the title of the world's most active volcano. However, scientists believe that its nearby neighbor of Kilauea could actually be the hottest volcano on Earth. Temperatures of the magma inside of Kilauea are around 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. This is hot enough to melt pretty much anything that goes in. Theoretically, a vessel made of pure tungsten could survive as it has the highest melting point of all metals at 6,191 degrees Fahrenheit. But there would have to be 0 impurities or vulnerabilities in the vessel. Otherwise, everything inside would be incinerated. If there is one place you can't go on planet Earth, no matter how much protection you have, it's inside a volcano. Although there is still one other place that is impossible for you or anyone else to visit, and it is not for the reasons that you might think. According to many world maps and even Google Maps until recently, Sandy Island is a small spit of land between Australia and the French territory of New Caledonia. This might seem like a nice area to travel to, and that it wouldn't even be hard to reach by boat. But no matter how hard you tried, you still would never be able to reach this island. And that's because it doesn't exist. That's right. Even though you can find it on maps, there is no such place as Sandy Island. Scientists from the University of Sydney noticed the mysterious island appeared on multiple maps, charts, and even Google Maps, but they didn't know anyone who had been there or even seen it, so they set out to find out what was going on. When the scientists got to the exact coordinates of Sandy Island, there was nothing but blue waters of the Coral Sea. The scientists did some further investigating and found that even though the island wasn't there, Sandy Island appeared on maps and publications going back for at least a decade. The scientists were baffled and had no explanation for where the island had gone or if it ever really existed. Australia's Hydrographic Service, which is in charge of producing the nation's nautical charts and maps, suggested the mysterious island could have just been the result of human error that was copied onto document after document for years. So if you're looking to get to Sandy Island, you are out of luck, as the only thing you'll find there is 4,620 feet of water. It's worth noting that although Sandy Island never existed, there are many places around the world that will become extremely difficult or impossible to visit in the future due to climate change. Scientists have found that emissions and pollution caused by humans have led to an average increase of about 2 degrees Fahrenheit across the globe, and it's predicted that by 2050, the global average temperatures will be 3 degrees Fahrenheit higher than they would have been without human-caused climate change. This may not seem like a lot, but we have to remember that these are global temperature increases, which include the Arctic, Antarctic, and glaciers across the planet. As temperatures increase, more snow and ice will melt, storms will become stronger, and the waters of the oceans will actually expand slightly. All of this will result in sea levels rising by 10 to 12 inches in the next 30 years. Many islands, some of which are currently inhabited, like Maldives Tuvalu and Marshall Islands, will be underwater. This means that the only way to visit them will be by chartering a boat and driving under the waves of the sea. So due to human-caused climate change, locations that are easy to reach today will be much more difficult to get to in the future. But even after remote islands have been covered by water, caves still descend miles into the earth, and mountains reach thousands of feet into the sky, the inside of a volcano will remain the one location on Earth that is truly impossible to visit.